He is a columnist for Newsweek and the author of Proof of Collusion, oh good, and the forthcoming book, Proof of Conspiracy. Seth Abramson. Seth. Hey, how you doing, sir? Great to meet you. Thank you for being here. I hope we will get to the proof of collusion soon, but before we do that, I want to just talk about your technique because I think it's very exciting when there's a new literary event, and I would say what you do is that. I mean, you're a, what is the word you use, a curatologist or a curatology or?
Curatorial journalist.
I can't get that, but I get close. And what you really do is put out a long Twitter feed. I've read it, and it's interesting because it's like watching someone write a book in real time. You don't mind if people see that you make mistakes, you erase stuff, you amend stuff, you edit stuff. So is this like the new version of what we went through in maybe the 70s when there was the new journalism, when they were mixing fact and fiction? You think this is as big a change?
Well, I think it's definitely new. We're in the digital age now, and what we find is not that there isn't enough quality journalism, but that there's actually so much of it that a lot of it falls through the cracks. It gets published, read once, and then forgotten. So what a curatorial journalist does is they look back decades across media that's being published across different continents, and they see stories that are lost and how they connect with one another and how they might be important now but weren't realized as important as at the time.
So you connect the dots.
Exactly.
You're the guy at the evidence wall.
Essentially, yeah.
With the red tape. You know, I did a sketch of that once, but mine was, yeah, there it is. We put there's there's Fat Donnie in the middle, and but you do it for real, and it's interesting. You've said that Donald Trump is the live embodiment of the internet. What do you mean by that?
Well, he is. I mean, he's ubiquitous. He's in our lives every second of every day. He wants to be in our lives every second of every day.
Right.
And he's bad for us, and he fatigues us, just like the internet does.
You also have said he's the first meta-modern criminal scandal. This is the first meta-modern criminal scandal. Now, what does that mean?
Well, it means that everything Donald Trump does that is illicit and in another period of time would have been done behind closed doors or secretly on an audio tape that we don't have access to, he does right in public. Russia, if you're listening, or any of his other statements suggesting that he's colluding in plain sight.
I'm glad you said that. I've said that myself for a long time. So we did something tonight to illustrate this. Now, the comparison, of course, is always to Nixon. But Nixon tried everything he could to keep it secret. As you say, right. Trump does the exact opposite. He does it in plain sight. I think this is the genius to his getting away with everything. I don't think he knows he's doing it. I think it's because he's a narcissist. But this is the effect of it. So what we did was we took some of the things that Trump has said, again, in broad daylight, and we put them on a tape, just like he did with the Nixon tapes. Now imagine if you were hearing this for the first time in this way, where we just got this. Imagine that Donald Trump was surreptitiously taped and you heard it this way.
President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. I was going to fire Coven. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. President Putin, he just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
Now, if people had heard that, wouldn't we say that's the smoking gun?
It's possible, but you know, the other thing, Bill, is that there are things that he does behind closed doors, right? Negotiating for 2 years while he was running for president, a multi-billion-dollar real estate deal with the Kremlin and with Russians, right? But when that comes out and when we find out about it, he then does 10, 12, 20 things that seem just as bad within the next 24 to 48 hours.
Right.
And as a result, we lose sight of how important even the hidden thing that becomes public is.
But there was a guy who was trying to put these dots together for 2 years, Robert Mueller. Why did he punt on this? Why did he not, you know, call... I mean, answer the call of history when it was so plainly his job to do that. I mean, I thought this guy, I guess we all did, was going to be the one to say here, because as I've said before, just what we know, and this is what you do. You put down just what we know. What is in his mind, do you think?
Well, I think a lot of people are saying that he punted, and I don't think that that's accurate, right? On obstruction, he knew that he couldn't indict the president. You can't indict a sitting president under DOJ regulations, and therefore he wanted to pass that case through to Congress. Had he made a judgment on obstruction, he might have lost gravitas. You might have had 50% of the country who are more conservative, considering him to be a boogeyman because now he's put his finger on the scale. He maintained his gravitas by saying, here's all the evidence. It had to go to Congress anyway, so here it is. On the question of collusion, I think we have to understand that the Mueller investigation hasn't really ended. It has simply transformed into now 20 pending federal and state investigations in jurisdictions all around the country where the evidence that Mueller collected on the question of collusion, bribery, aiding and abetting, money laundering, illegal solicitation of campaign donations is now being looked at by federal prosecutors from California all the way to New York City and Virginia.
And what will be the upshot of that?
I think
Donald Trump leaving office? I don't see that from...
Well, I'd say this, right? We sometimes say, how could there be no finding of conspiracy by Robert Mueller, right? Or that he could not establish beyond reasonable doubt that there was conspiracy. The interesting thing, Bill, is that no one was really accusing Donald Trump of having a before-the-fact signed agreement with the Internet Research Agency that was doing all the propaganda, or the GRU, Russian military intelligence, that was doing the hacking.
But that's not how conspiracies work.
Exactly
You don't have
right.
to say it.
Right, exactly.
Michael Cohen said that. He said Trump never gives you an order. He says what he thinks is reality, which isn't at the time, but you take that as his underling, that he would like you to carry out something that would make that happen.
Right, and as importantly, that's not how bribery works, which is fundamentally what we're going to be looking at and what a lot of these investigations are looking at, whether Donald Trump sold America's foreign policy in exchange for personal profit. That's still being looked at by some of these jurisdictions, as well as aiding and abetting, which is when you know someone's committing a crime and then you offer them an inducement to continue committing that crime.
This Barr investigation now is looking into, he wants to look into the origins of the investigation. Well, I think I read in your piece that there were 5 American allies who warned us about contacts that they had picked up, their intelligence services, right? Picked up between the Russian agents, and Trump operatives.
Right, this is July of 2016, and this is actually how the counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign, or several individuals in that campaign, started, is our allies, our friends were worried about our national security, so 5 of their intel agencies told us, hey, there are meetings happening in Europe between Trump advisors and Russians that are incredibly concerning. And that's what got everything started. It wasn't the Steele dossier, it wasn't even
And will
George
that be in the Mueller
Papadopoulos'
report?
post. Well, we don't know what's going to be in the Mueller report.
Well, how could it not be if that's what happened? You know that happened.
Yes, no, there's no question that that happened. The question is how much of Mueller's report is going to focus on why the investigation started when, as I think many people believe, that's really immaterial to the findings of the investigation.
And the Steele tape, the Steele dossier, and the P tape, let's be honest, that's the... I've heard you say that you think that's such a real thing, that the Donald Trump paid 2 hookers to pee on each other. I don't believe that. Well, I believe they did it. I don't believe he paid them.
I'll tell you what I know. What I know, and what we all know, is that in January of 2017, the BBC contacted the CIA and asked the question any good investigative journalist would ask, which is, do these tapes exist? And we know, because the BBC published this in January 2017, that the CIA got back to the BBC and said there are multiple tapes from multiple locations, and they are of a sexual nature, and they involve Donald Trump. What happened after that is British media then followed up on that BBC report, The Independent, The Telegraph, The Guardian, the BBC, and they found lots of evidence that there were witnesses who saw women who were going to be signed in to go up to his room, and they were arguing about whether they would have to put their names down. That was all reported in British media. I couldn't tell you why it's not reported in America, but that's why I'm a curatorial journalist, so I can find that information, let people know it's there, even if they're not reading it here domestically.
So maybe you're kind of picking up where Julian Assange was before he went bad, because we used to like him. You know, he used to really be doing a good service, and then something happened. I guess his hatred for Hillary Clinton maybe is what turned him basically into someone who was a Russian aide, really, and somebody who helped Trump get elected. Now, he just got out of the embassy, but it's not going to be good for him. Why didn't Mueller get to him? I mean, it seems like he knows a lot, that whole thing with Roger Stone and WikiLeaks. Why couldn't Mueller have gone after him?
Well, Julian Assange's case is in the Eastern District of Virginia, and right now, one of the 20 pending federal and state investigations into Trump, his family, his aides, his associates, his allies, is in the Eastern District of Virginia. And so prosecutors, once they get him stateside, will be in a position to ask him questions that all of us want answers to. For instance, did he have contact with Trump advisors Ted Malek, Paul Manafort, Donald Trump Jr., Randy Credico, Jerome Corsi, all these people who we've seen reports in the past. And again, these are reports that sort of disappeared, and I tried to bring them back through threads on social media to say, look, this is happening. All these people allegedly had contact with Julian Assange. That could be a focal point for collusion, so hopefully someone's going to ask that question.
Well,
did you talk to these guys?
Please keep doing it. We need you on that wall, the evidence wall. Coffee, meth, whatever it takes. Stay on the wall. All right, thank you, Seth.